Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and welcome back to the breaking news. Today's breaking news brings us to the airfield in Morozovsk, where we were able to hear that Ukrainian drone attacks were able to knock out a pin that held two Su-34 fighter bombers near to the area of the runway. We were able to hear of this strike just an hour or two ago, as we got information that overnight the Ukrainians did launch an attack on this airfield, and we were able to get picture evidence, as you can see in the top two pictures, of fires that had begun at the Morozovsk airfield, showing that drones had impacted the site and were causing considerable damage. We were also able to get additional video and picture evidence from the attacks at Morozovsk airfield, which we can see right here. We can once again see very similar pictures to ones we just saw last of the fire that has occurred at Morozovsk airfield from the attack, but we also have a video. We can hear the drone flying towards Morozovsk airfield. And that's the end of that clip. But moving on from that, we then got a satellite picture of Morozovsk airfield, which we can see right here. According to the information that we have, a specific building or a specific hangar was more so stricken near to the runway, which we can see right here, with a visibly large hole inside of it, and what appears to be the bluish fuselages of two Su-34s that were within the facility when it was hit and caught on fire. We were able to find this building, and it is exactly on the runway right here. This is where it is, and from what we understand, the Su-34s were towed into this small tent-like structure and kept here for a while. This is some sort of a repair facility at the airbase to keep their Su-34 fighter bombers functioning, and from what we understand, the fire may have ended up causing considerable damage, or may have destroyed the Su-34s, although we don't really have clear intelligence or clear data on that at the moment. However, a fire in the structure that these aircraft were in would most likely lead to some sort of damage being caused to the Su-34s, and not just no damage whatsoever to the actual aircraft. Going off of this, we are starting to see a very reoccurring trend. It's actually quite common at this point that Russian air bases are able to be attacked and hit quite heavily by Ukrainian drones without really the presence of air defense at all. We were able to see this not too long ago, a little while away in Oktyabinsk, where we got to see that two Su-57s got destroyed in a drone attack that hit the tarmac, blew up the aircraft, and caught them on fire. At the exact same time, we're now seeing this very same thing at Morozovsk, and it's starting to lead a lot of people to having the question of, is Russian air defense even existent inside of Ukraine? There is no airfield-based air defense at this point. We do know that quite clearly, because these Ukrainian drone attacks are not even facing small arms fire as a form of resistance to the incoming drones. We also understand that because of that, surface-to-air missiles are completely non-existent, as they don't even have basic small arms rifle fire that we were beginning to hear. So all levels of air defense appear to be completely gone at this point, deep inside the Russian Federation near these airfields. And a lot of people are starting to say that the Russians have no air defense beyond what's inside of Ukraine, or occupied Ukraine for the most part, and also within the area of Belgrade as well. And it's leading me to wonder, what do y'all think about Russian air defense? Of course, from our information, it does appear that they're largely without any sort of real air defense at this point. But let me know in the comment section below if you believe that the Russians do have air defense, it's just that they're not using it, or if they have no air defense whatsoever and the skies are practically open throughout the entirety of the Russian Federation to incoming Ukrainian drone attacks. Meanwhile, moving on from this big news at Morozovsk airfield of another major attack hitting several more Su-34s, we were also able to hear that apparently the Russian Minister of Defense, Belousov, the brand new Minister of Defense appointed after the removal of Sergei Shoigu, has visited a command post of the Russian Aerospace Forces and watched them operating a drone center, which we can see right here. Belousov has no actual military experience in his career. And we can see him here inside of this military headquarters appearing to speak like he has some experience as he watches the Russian Aerospace Forces conduct their operations.
Появляется организация ведения воздушной разведки объекта, контроль полетов беспилотных летательных аппаратов и вывод на экран общего пользования видеоизображения беспилотных летательных аппаратов.
You can see them showing something that was hidden burning.
Все рабочие места комплекса ТС-100 фиксируют передает разведчику.
And that's the end of that clip. It's still showing a little bit that Belousov is getting out there, although I'm not really sure if Belousov knows what's going on. It looks as though he had absolutely no idea or no clue. And if you heard him at the end of the clip, he actually said, that's pretty cool. Like, he literally just said that. That's really his military knowledge. All he knows is that something looks cool, and that's about it. A lot of people have been saying that Belousov is going to end up being a worse minister of defense than Sergei Shoigu, considering that he has literally no military experience whatsoever, as compared to the Ukrainian switch from Zaluzhny, which had a decent amount of military experience, to Oleksandr Syrsky, who also has an extremely high amount of military experience. Not only that, was the commander of most successful campaigns in the Ukraine war. We are assuming that Belousov is really going to be largely ineffective. But once again, let us know what y'all think about Belousov. Do y'all think that he's going to be fairly good running the Russian military or not? Because in that video alone, I'm not really getting that good of an impression. Moving on into the area of Kursk, we were also able to hear that apparently explosions were also occurring in Kursk as well over the course of yesterday, which we can see in this clip right here. And then moving on into our next one. And then finally, we can see the smoke cloud rising right there. But a lot of people have been talking about these attacks and how they're certainly showing, while we were talking about earlier, it may be a question that Russian air defense is good or not, it's certainly showing that Russian air defense is poor. We're seeing that a lot of Ukrainian drones are making their way deep into the Russian Federation, into the areas around major cities, and they're striking military targets amongst a wide variety of other sorts of targets. It's leading a lot of people to believe that the Russians really do have just simply no air defense at all, and the Ukrainians are able, as long as they have the drones, to conduct strikes on any target that they deem necessary or a part of the war effort inside the Russian Federation to knock out. But moving on from that, it appears that Putin is very sure that while the Russians are getting hammered from the skies by incredibly inexpensive drones, and at the same time their air forces can't even be protected from simple drone attacks as well, that it is now time once again to get to the peace negotiating table. It's time to start talking about an end to this war with the Ukrainians, and we have been able to hear the terms for surrender as of today, or more so, what Putin is calling the terms for peace. Apparently, according to Putin, as a condition to start negotiations, Ukraine has to withdraw all of its troops from the entirety of the Kherson, Donetsk, Luhansk, and Zaporizhia oblasts. Not only that, but the West, in the peace negotiations, would have to lift all sanctions from Russia if Ukraine was to accept these terms. And not only that, the Ukrainians also were to never join NATO, period. Now, these are some interesting terms, of course, completely unacceptable, but interesting nevertheless, because if you really think about them, they are a lot less harsh than the terms that were put out at the beginning of the war. And it is still showing that with more time, these terms will most likely become less harsh and will most likely reach that status quo antebellum agreement that we're looking at, that will establish the 1991 borders as the recognized borders by the Russian Federation as well. A couple of things have changed since the beginning of the war. One, the Russians are not demanding the unconditional surrender of Ukrainian armed forces in the conflict, which was almost always a prerequisite to negotiations at the beginning of the war. That is showing that they are starting to see that the success of this war, or victory in this war, is highly unlikely. Another thing that we're seeing is that they're not demanding all of Western Ukraine, which would be everything that lies, well, actually all of Eastern Ukraine, which is everything that lies east of the Dnieper River. We're seeing that they're not claiming that anymore. They just want to claim the Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson oblasts. However, there are unacceptable terms to this agreement. One, the Ukrainians will never be able to enter NATO, which is a huge no for the Ukrainians. They are very adamant on wanting to enter NATO. A second thing that is a big no-no is that the Ukrainians would have to withdraw from everything inside the Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk, and Luhansk oblasts. And while the Russians do control pretty much all of the Luhansk oblast, they do not control about half of the Donetsk oblast, half of the Zaporizhia oblast, and then also half of the Kherson oblast, specifically the major cities of Zaporizhia and Kherson, which if the Ukrainians agreed to those terms, they would have to give up. And not only those towns, but they'd also have to give up Kramatorsk and Slovyansk as well, which are towns of major size that the Ukrainians currently control. these terms would be completely unacceptable to the Ukrainians. And while these terms have been given forward by the Russians to the Ukrainians, we of course are already seeing that no serious consideration will be given to that peace agreement, and the Ukrainians will continue the war on as normal, with Zelensky already making a statement that this is like peace negotiation attempts of old, nothing new, the war will go on, and the Ukrainians will not be attempting to reach any kind of a peace settlement with the Russian Federation going forward. However, we were also able to hear that within the area of Moscow, the Russian stock market has completely collapsed today. The websites are down. It appears that they've been deliberately taken down by the Russian Federation, or really the Moscow exchange itself, and we can see that as people tried to access the websites are completely down. Not only that, but we can also see that the National Clearing Center of the Russian Federation is also down as well, which is the National Settlement Depository and the National Clearing Center all in one. From what we understand, this website is the one that people would go to if their bank was to collapse, and they would be able to get some sort of financial insurance for the money that they put in the bank. It's a lot like the FDIC of the United States, but in a Russian form. The difference in between the two is that while in the United States, your money is insured up into $250,000 US, which is approximately 4 years worth of average income right now in the United States, the Russian version of the FDIC, the National Settlement Deposit and the National Clearing Center, only insure 1.4 million rubles, which sounds like a lot until you translate it into US dollars, and that's only 15,139 US dollars as of the making of this video, which is just a little over 1 year's worth of salary of average income in the Russian Federation. Now you can kind of get an idea of why these websites are going down, because when the banks collapse, which it appears that they will because so many people are withdrawing their money, they will not be able to pay out all of these people. We're assuming that some of the major banks inside the Russian Federation, like the actual Russian bank, may end up collapsing because of the massive amount of panic that's currently going on inside the Russian Federation. If that is the case, there's no way that even these small insurance amounts can be paid out to the tens of millions of people that will be demanding them. And so these websites are already going down and making it far more difficult to reach them because they already see the economic collapse that is going to be coming around the corner. Considering that the websites have shut down and the banks haven't even collapsed yet, it is giving us a really clear indication that information is already circling in the higher echelons of the Russian Federation that the banks are going to be collapsing, and that they ought to get on top of the curve and shut down their websites and make it pretty much impossible for people to try and get any kind of financial insurance before the banks actually collapse. Otherwise, it'll be too late by that point. And so going off of all of that, you can get the idea that the picture inside the Russian Federation is still as grave as it was yesterday. Even more grave than of course before, because now we're seeing not only is the Russian Federation clearly showing signs that the banks will be collapsing, we're also seeing that at the exact same time, the Russian Federation is being hammered by drone attacks, and the brand new Minister of Defense Belousov knows so little about military information and military technology, or really how war is conducted as a whole, that he looks at a whole bunch of people operating drones in a control room and just says, hey, that looks pretty cool. Meanwhile, over in NATO, we've also been able to hear that apparently Hungary is getting put outside of the information loop, as NATO is limiting the exchange of information with the Hungarian government. According to the information that we have from V-Square, the North Atlantic Alliance has limited the exchange of information, including intelligence, with Hungary due to the position of the country's authorities in relation with NATO. We, of course, are getting a good idea that the Hungarian government may have some slight Russian leanings, and we have seen that they have not supported Ukraine throughout most of the war, and not only that, have shown statements that they would rather let the Russians win in Ukraine, possibly, or maybe something along those lines, or maybe that's not NATO's problem, and they should not worry about it. For this reason, we have seen that NATO members have taken it upon themselves to limit the amount of information that is given to Hungary at any given moment, just in case if that link is compromised and the Hungarians are relaying that back to the Russians, which is a little unlikely, but still a security precaution that is being taken. Of course, some people are going to be saying, well, that's wrong of NATO to do, and a lot of people would be forgetting with that statement that NATO is not a monolithic block that is just a organism that exists in the world and just does whatever it does. It is made up of a multitude of different nations. Some of those largest and most important nations as far as intelligence and information is the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and Germany. those countries are probably deciding on their own, within their own version of the Departments of State or the Ministries of Interior, that it would not be prudent to provide any kind of intelligence information, or any information for that matter, to the Hungarian government about what's going on in Ukraine or what's going on with the Russian Federation. This could end up compromising the security that they have, or the information that they have, and that information could be relayed back to the Russian Federation, where the Russian Federation will then know what the West knows about them, be able to figure out what they do not know, and not only that, they will also probably be able to get some additional information about what NATO is planning on doing based off of the information that they are privy to on the Russians. And so it does appear that Hungary is starting to get a little bit of a show of an arm's length distance treatment from most of the major NATO members. And let me know in the comment section below, do y'all believe that that is a right thing to do for NATO, for them to withhold information and intelligence from the nation state, a member of NATO like Hungary, just because they do not trust him? Or do you believe that information should always flow freely through all NATO members? Let me know what y'all think about that in the comment section below. But with that, we have reached the end of this news segment. I got to thank you all so much once again for watching. It is, of course, an absolute honor and a privilege to be able to share all of this news with you all each and every day. If y'all did enjoy this video, please make sure to subscribe. About 60% of y'all who watch these videos are not subscribed, and while it doesn't really matter, we would really love it if y'all did subscribe. It makes us really happy. Not only that, if you hit the like button and comment, that's also a very nice thing as well. And if you would like, you can support us on Patreon. The link for that is in the description below. And I want to give a huge shout out to all of our patrons who are always supporting this channel and helping to make video projects like these possible on a daily basis, allowing us to provide the news to so many hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions of people around the world. And so with that, I thank you all so much once again for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.